Welcome into the Awesemo.com NASCAR Live Before Lock show is here to get ready for tonight's Blue-Emu Maximum Pain Relief 400. Yeah, it's a long race to say here, but we're here to break this one down for you. Of course, we are sponsored by PrizePicks. Later on in the show, we'll tell you about some picks over at PrizePicks prop plays that we do like as well. Of course, as always, join me here in NASCAR Live Before Lock is Chris Pennell. Chris, man, great to be talking with you here on a Saturday night race. So hopefully everyone's got the note that the race is here on Saturday night and not on Sunday.
Yeah, every time there's a Saturday race, I always get comments on Sunday morning saying, where's all the content for the race? I'm like, you missed it. It was last night. But I'm looking forward to today's race. Should be a fun one to break down. Another short, flat track. And Martinsville was one of my favorite tracks in the series.
And I think, obviously we want to start off talking about roster construction and game theory and how to kind of approach this from a short track perspective. Of course, when we're talking about high price drivers in the back of the field versus the front of the field and how to approach this one.
Yeah, so for a short track, I know there's a lot of appealing place differential plays on this slate. Like you have Martin Truex Jr., who crushed it last week. He's starting in P20. He's an excellent driver here at Martinsville. I mean, name of the tracks isn't his name. He just happens to be so great here. So if you love narratives, there you go. Denny Ham, another driver that's really good here. He's starting P25. Ross Chastain, he's been hot this year. He's starting P27. These guys are very appealing on paper. The thing is, if they never end up getting up front, I talked about this earlier, but if they get a P8, P6 finish, yeah, that's a very nice floor. But if they're not going to get up front and dominate, like guys like Chase Elliott, like William Byron, or some of these other drivers starting close to the front, they're not going to have those 100-point ceilings that we're chasing in tournaments on DraftKings.
When we talk about, in terms of some of these high price options, I mean, obviously you already mentioned too, the chalk plays are already out there. I mean, obviously in cash games, I mean, it's going to be a little, you're looking at Chase Elliott. I mean, how do you not put Chase Elliott in your lineup, starting on the pole? William Byron to me is going to be another popular play out there, but how are you kind of putting cash lineups together as opposed to GPP lineups?
Yeah, I mean, as far as cash games go, I am just going to lock in Chase Elliott on the pool. And honestly, in tournaments, I might be doing the same thing. Yes, he is going to be extremely high owned, but if you're trying to get leverage on a very chalky guy, you sometimes just have to go double the field. And in that case, we're talking about pretty much being all in on Chase Elliott, but it's the perfect spot for him. And we can talk about him in a little bit. But as far as cash and tournament roster construction, in cash games, if you want to go with the 2-dom approach and maybe mix in more so guys like Tyler Reddick, Ross Chastain to balance that out, that's perfectly fine. But in tournaments, I'm trying to get that potential third dominator, like dominator hybrid place differential finishing position guy. So like in tournaments, I'd be more inclined to go with a Alex Bowman than I would a Ross Chastain in cash games.
When we talk about that dominator versus place differential and always mention about it, if you're an Awesemo Plus member, you look at that top drivers tool, and one of the tools I always look at is that top 2 dominator percentage over on DraftKings, over FanDuel. I'm more looking at that top 5 percentage, but I mean, obviously Chase Elliott's going to be is someone you're considering as a dominator. One guy that is getting percentage on dominator is Kyle Larson, but I heard you talking about Kyle Larson, kind of, throwing out there the good and bad of maybe putting him in a dominator role.
Yeah, I think with Kyle Larson is, I mean, he's short flat tracks, really not his bread and butter. I do like him today. He was strong in practice, and the Hendrick cars overall have looked very, very strong. And starting in P8, it's not like he's in the back of the pack. There are some other drivers I'm just a fan of more. I like Ryan Blaney at $10,900 starting in P12. I know, big surprise. I like Ryan Blaney, but the thing with Kyle Larson this year is he's not the Kyle Larson of 2021 where every single race, it just looked like he was going to dominate and just win the entire thing. That's not really been the case this year. Yeah, he's still running fine, but he hasn't really been his overly dominant self. And that is a bit of a price point to pay for a guy that might run P3, P4 all day without getting up front.
Of course, we'll get into some of these dominators and place differential drivers. Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button right here on this video. It does help us out a ton. Of course, if you're not an Awesemo Plus member, you want to get a peek what's been a free premium day in tools today, if I can speak correctly here. Today's free premium day in tools are NBA player projections, MLB main slate ownership projections, NHL ownership projection, also UFC pro plays, UFC going on. Of course, MLB is already kicking off. NBA is already kicked off. It's a major night of sports here in the United States. Ton of sports action to take in. Of course, check out all those free premium day and tools we have over at Awesemo.com. And if you want to sign up for an Awesemo Plus Pass, you can sign up there over at Awesemo.com/join. So let's get into the top tier drivers here. So these are going to be the drivers who are 9K and above over on DraftKings. So we got Martin Truex Jr.'s most expensive driver, both on DraftKings and FanDuel. He's starting 20th. Chase Elliott on the pole. We already kind of mentioned him briefly there. Ryan Blaney starting 12th. Kyle Larson starting 8th. Denny Hamlin starting 25th. Kyle Busch starting 11th. Joey Logano starting 14th. William Byron starting 5th. Alex Bowman 15th. Christopher Bell starting 7th. So, I mean, I guess we just got to start there at Chase Elliott. He's got to be a smash play here. I mean, look, our projections, we love what he can do here today. Start on the pole, which we know that can mean here on a short track.
Yeah, this is going to more than likely, unless we have a mechanical issue from Chase Elliott, he's probably well on his way to leading over 100 laps in this race, at least stage one, which is 80 laps. I mean, usually when we have qualifying, we're going to see several drivers in the top 5 that have a good chance of dominating. But the thing is, right behind Chase Elliott, he's not surrounded by the best group of drivers. There's Eric Almirola, Cole Custer, Chris Buescher. So I think he's got a nice cushion from William Byron early on, enough to where he can kind of set sail for a bit. Yes, he's going to get into lap traffic, and maybe we'll see some moves there, but Chase Elliott checks just about every single box for me. He was the top dog in practice. He had a good long run car. He's good at Martinsville. He's good at short flat tracks. He's got the preferred pit stall, and his pit crew has been good this year. So if there's one bad thing to say about Chase Elliott, someone can let me know, because I cannot find
it. Talking about some of these drivers who are up here in this tier, you got 2 drivers who are starting, one starting 20th, the other starting 25th. Of course, the guy starting 20th is the most expensive driver today in Martin Truex Jr., and the other one being Denny Hamlin starting 25th. So we got a ton of place differential potentially sitting there.
Yeah, and they are going to pick up ownership for sure, because when people see a big name driver starting the back, especially 2 big name drivers, they're actually pretty good at short flat tracks and at Martinsville. And Denny Hamlin won the race last week, and Martin Truex Jr. is one of the best plays on the slate. So yes, they are going to pick up ownership. The issue I have is I don't think they're going to be able to get up front and dominate. And while they do have nice safe floors, I talked about it earlier, where I gave Truex around an 8th place finish, which is fantastic for starting P20. And I gave him around 17 dominator points. And even then, we're looking at around 65, 66 DraftKings points, just my projections. And I mean, if you get a driver like Chase Elliott starting on the pole, his path to dominating and those dominator points accumulate very, very quickly. Same can be said for a guy like Kyle Larson, William Byron starting up front. So I'm not really looking to chase this place differential here, and I'm planning on being pretty underweight to the field.
In terms of when we look at these drivers, and in terms of our projection when it comes to ownership, one of the drivers that's getting decent amount of ownership is the driver that's starting in 15th spot. That's Alex Bowman, who's 9,300 on DraftKings, 10,200 over on FanDuel.
Yeah, and I was viewing him more of a tournament play after we saw qualifying yesterday at this price point, but he's actually in my cash game build right now. I've just been trying to jam in as many Hendrick drivers as possible. I currently have 3 in my main build right now, but Alex Bowman finished P8 at Richmond last week. He was a recent winner at Martinsville, and he had a top 5, top 6 car across the board in practice, and he's cheap enough at $9,300 and starting on 15th place. I mean, hard not to like it as a guy that can get him for a top 5 and pick up fast laps along the way. A decently cheap price point compared to the other Hendrick drivers.
Of course, we all know your fandom for Ryan Blaney. Of course, he started 12th here today, 10,900. So 3rd most expensive driver over on DraftKings, 13,000 over on FanDuel. Also a 3rd most expensive driver over there.
Yeah, the nice thing always about Ryan Blaney is he's always a little bit. He's usually much cheaper than this at $10,900. We're usually getting him in that mid 9K range. DraftKings beefed up his price, and so did FanDuel. I know in FanDuel last week, he was around $9,500, which is just basically a freebie. Now up to $11K over on DraftKings. So it's not as easy to fit him in as like your secondary dominator. You kind of have to build around him. But that's not a bad thing necessarily. I'm hoping that keeps people a little bit away from him. He's still going to pick up ownership, but in the long runs in practice, he was right up there with Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson as having one of the best cars, and it's going to play out quite nicely in a 400-lap race. And fantastic at Martinsville, has the best average finish here over the past 6 races, and he's dominated both short flat tracks we've been at so far this year. So I'm no surprise, but I do like Ryan Blaney.
I mean, and you mentioned this last week. Last week we had soft pricing. This week is a totally different story.
Yeah, I'm not having nearly as fun putting lineups this weekend as I was last week.
Looking at other drivers here that are in this one, Kyle Busch starting 11th. He's 10,000 on DraftKings, 12,000 on FanDuel.
Of all the JGR cars, Kyle Busch is currently the one I am highest on. I'm pretty overweight to the field right now. He was just the only one that really had a strong practice. Like Christopher Bell was P18 in the 10 lap. Denny Hamlin was P24. Martin Truex Jr. wasn't terrible at P12, but Kyle Busch was a top 3 car in the 10 and 15 and 20 lap runs. They fall off a little bit in the 25, but this is a pretty good price point on Kyle Busch for a guy that can win at any kind of track. And I hate to even mention the Busch Clash, but he was pretty good here at the beginning of the season, which is kind of like a mini Martinsville.
You mentioned about Christopher Bell. Of course, he is starting 7th here, 9,100 on DraftKings, 9,500 over FanDuel. And he's just a driver that people aren't getting to today.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. Like, I can make a case for just about every driver above him being a decent play, but Christopher Bell, well, yes, he is good at short flat tracks. I loved him last week, did very well for us at Richmond. I'm going to kind of hop off the train here, and it seems like most people are going to agree. The practice speeds weren't there. JGR, besides Kyle Busch, was just kind of down, and he hasn't really crushed Martinsville yet.
Mike, I appreciate you in the super chat. I'll get to your question here in a little bit when we talk a little bit about AJ Allmendinger. Of course, I'll talk about the drivers here that are at the top of the heap here. Joey Logano starting 14th. I think he's the only driver we really haven't touched on in this price range. He's 9,700 on DraftKings, 11,500 over on FanDuel.
So I'm kind of viewing him as a similar play to Ryan Blaney, but he's over $1,000 cheaper, so it is kind of easy to get to him. I don't think he has quite the dominant upside. He just hasn't really flashed it yet this year, but Logano's a guy the past couple of seasons where if we're at a short flat track, he's got to at least be somewhat on your radar. And starting in P14, you're getting the nice place differential upside for a driver that's pretty much borderline elite at Martinsville.
Of course, this is the Awesemo NASCAR live before lock shows are getting you right here for 2 days. Blue-Emu Maximum Pain Relief 400. And we do got a promo going on right now over awesemo.com for our MLB Express weekly pass. You can get that for just $1 when you use the promo code FASTBALL at checkout. This gives you access to our player rankings, ownership rankings, lineup builder, and our expert Discord chat. Of course, Discord, we're always in there chatting with all of our subscribers there. So be sure to take advantage of this offer. This offer does expire on April the 11th. And once again, get our MLB Express Weekly Pass for $1 when you use the promo code FASTBALL at checkout. Now let's move on to the mid-tier drivers here. So these drivers ranging in the 8 to 6K range. So we got Ross Chastain starting 27th, Tyler Reddick 22nd, Kevin Harvick 6th, Chase Briscoe 19th, Kurt Busch 18th, Brad Keselowski 9th, Austin Dillon 23rd, Eric Amarola 2nd, Austin Cindric 13th, Eric Jones 24th, Chris Buescher 4th, Daniel Suarez 30th, AJ Allmendinger 36th, Bubba Wallace 21st, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. 28th, Cole Custer starting 3rd. So we'll mention Mike here. I appreciate you in the super chat asking about is AJ Allmendinger a fade now? Allmendinger 6,600 over on DraftKings, 5,000 on FanDuel.
So it looks like he's going to pick up quite a bit of ownership starting dead last. I don't personally like AJ Allmendinger here. If he didn't have to do the pass-through penalty, I'd be all about Dinger. He'd be one of my highest owned drivers, but this pass-through penalty to start the race is going to be a major issue for him. We talked about this last week for Justin Haley, who was in a similar spot. He got lucky with the quick yellow, so he got back in the lead lap, but even then he wasn't optimal. Now we're at a shorter track at Martinsville where he's going to go about 2 laps down to start this race. And with such a small track, assuming Chase Elliott's just leading laps, he is going to lap a bunch of cars pretty early on. It's not going to take too long for that to happen. So there's a chance that AJ Allmendinger is just never on the lead lap. He's clawing his way to a top 28 finish. And if that's going to be the case, that's just not going to get the job done to be in the optimal lineup in tournaments. So if he's going to be high owned in any way, I want to be underweight on that.
FYI, radar doesn't look great either, too. So just to throw that one out there, just seeing Bob tweeting out, as he says, the rain has returned and there is rain all up in that area. So just something to kind of keep in mind when you're putting your lineups together for this one. I mean, generally speaking, how does that change your philosophy on how you put together your lineups?
It's not going to. I'm not going to be in the business of predicting how the weather is going to play out during the race. I think that's probably paralysis by analysis, but I think you just kind of have to hope you're in the right spot at the right time if the rain does hit. Now, if I'm not sure exactly what the hourly forecast is. So if there was rain moving in after the halfway point of the race, I'll look at this as we talk through it. But if that's the case, it could put less of an emphasis on the top level dominators and maybe some of these PD guys, because if we're only going to get half a race in, all those dominator points aren't going to be able to accumulate for the secondary dominators outside of Chase Elliott, like William Byron, Kyle Busch. That would be a bump for guys like Chastain, Reddick, Denny Hamlin, and Martin Truex.
Let's start with Ross Chastain there, 27th, 8,800 on DraftKings, 9,000 over on FanDuel. And when you look at this range of salaries, he is one of the more popular drivers in this range.
Yeah, I think he's a very good cash game play today. I think you can make a case to be underweight in tournaments just because he's going to carry that high ownership. And again, I just don't think he's really going to be able to get up front and dominate. And you have guys like Bell and Bowman that are right above him that are closer to the front and should be able to at least make some noise close to the front. You also have Tyler Reddick there, but Chastain, I mean, as good as he's been this year, I'm not going to fade the guy. I'm pretty close to even on the field as far as his ownership projection goes. I mean, he finished second at Phoenix earlier in the year. He was fast last week at Richmond, but ended up getting derailed at the end where he finished P19. But he was better than a P19 car. Price isn't bad. If you're playing cash games and playing Chastain, if you're playing tournaments, it's definitely not a must-have like it has been in recent weeks, but still fine play.
You mentioned about Tyler Reddick, so he is starting 5 spots ahead of Chastain, $200 cheaper over on FanDuel or on DraftKings at $8,600, $500 cheaper on FanDuel.
Yeah, I'm finding myself being more overweight to Reddick than I am Ross Chastain just because of ownership projections right now. I mean, they've both been kind of similar plays this year where they're fast just about everywhere. Finished P3 at Phoenix early in the season, finished P12 last week at Richmond. Both have just been super fast cars. Both in practice weren't super impressive. I mean, Ross Chastain was P13 in the 10 lap. Tyler Reddick was P17 in the 10 lap, but Reddick didn't have a great practice last week either, and he still ended up being fine. So I'm not going to be too concerned about that. But I mean, they're just fine place differential plays. I'm not really looking for them to dominate. They're more so fast lap guys that can finish somewhere in the top 10.
Kevin Harvick, he is starting 6, 8,400 on DraftKings, 9,300 on FanDuel. And is he in your dominator, potential kind of an outlier dominator pool?
Yeah, you kind of have to put him in there for where he's starting. It's kind of hard to view him as a dominator as an 8,400 play. And I'm not really one to ever play Kevin Harvick at Martinsville, but the reason being was we were always paying $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 for Kevin Harvick the past couple of seasons, and he just isn't really a dominator here at Martinsville. But at an $8,400 price point, you don't really need him to be a dominator. If he just hangs around where he starts and picks up fast laps and maybe sneaks into the top 4, kind of similar to what he did last week, it's actually kind of pretty much the same play as last week. I just don't like him quite as much at Martinsville as I did at Richmond. But practice was not too kind for Harvick, which was a little bit concerning for me. I did talk him up in the Awesemo top 5 DFS picks video. Figured we'd have a better practice than this, but he was P21 in the 10, P17 in the 15, and P14 in the 20. So I kind of dipped my exposures away from Harvick more than I thought I would, but I still have a decent chunk of him, but I'm not as excited as I was on like Friday or Saturday morning.
Then we got Chase Briscoe. He is starting 19th. He's 8,200 over on DraftKings, 8,300 over on FanDuel, and obviously is a guy that's not getting a ton of ownership here.
Yeah, and you have to think it's just because of who he's priced around. You have Kevin Harvick right there, Tyler Reddick, Ross Chastain, all very popular plays, and a lot of people are going stars and scrubsy today. So you're getting those top-level dominators, and you have to dip down to that 5, 6K range. So this 7 to lower 8K range is kind of getting skipped over, so it's a dead zone kind of bit. So it's a decent place to look to go in tournaments just because of lower ownership, but I'm not really high on Chase Briscoe. I know he won at a short flat track earlier this year, but P30 in the 10 lap in practice, I like where he's starting, but I do like the guy that's priced right below him quite a bit better.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. Kurt Busch, he is 18, so he's $200 cheaper than Chase Briscoe, $8,000, and $1,000 cheaper over on FanDuel at 7,300.
Yeah, I'm pretty big on the 2311 drivers. They both showed some speed. If you don't know the other teammate, that would be Bubba Wallace. We'll talk about him in a little bit. One of my favorite cheap plays on the slate. But Kurt Busch, I mean, showed top 10, top 8 speeds across the board in practice. If you played him last week, he was dead on arrival. Like the first few laps just blew up and had to go to the garage. So his race was over, and he was very, very highly owned. But this is another good price point. Starting P18, if he can contend for a top 12, that is not a bad day if he can pick up fast laps along the way. And here at Martinsville, he's got an average finish of 10th the past 6 races. So I think he's a pretty solid play.
Anyone who's sat here and listened to you on Live Before Lock, I think they probably know your opinion on Brad Keselowski, since it's not a super speedway. So he's starting 7,900 over on DraftKings, 8,000 on FanDuel.
I think you heard me talking last week because as soon as the race started, he jumped right to the top 10. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, as soon as I just said I'll take any driver over Keselowski, he just randomly has a fast car once again. So I was like, okay, whatever. I guess I'll have to get on some Keselowski again. So I liked him heading into the weekend. I just wish he wasn't starting so far close to the front because we're starting inside the top 10. And look, he's good at short flat tracks. He showed us some speed last week. The RFK cars, both him and Chris Buescher had some speed. So I'll buy in a little bit because Martinsville is a pretty unique track. And guys that are good at Martinsville are probably going to continue to be good here. And I don't think we can ignore that from Keselowski. He's just a top tier elite driver. Now that was in Penske equipment, but you have to imagine he can be a top 12, top 15 guy. Again, the starting spot is what's keeping me off here. I think he'll pick up a little bit of ownership, but I'm fine with just being even to a little bit underweight on the field here.
Then you got a guy who's looking at some place differential here in Austin Dillon. He's starting 23rd, 7,700 on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Austin Dillon, I'm not getting to too much because of the price jump, nearly $8,000. And like I said, this 7K to low 8K range is kind of a dead zone where I'm just chasing dominators and I have to get to the cheap range to just the way my roster construction looks like. So Austin Dillon, while on paper, P23 starting looks pretty good. Practice wasn't too kind to him. P23 in the 10 lap, P20 in the 15. I wouldn't say Martinsville's been an incredible track for him. Just have a few top 15s here, but an average finish around 20th place. He's like a fine, boring. I always call Austin Dillon just the most boring play out there. He's never going to be a flashy guy, but he tends to get the job done no matter what track it is. So if you're looking for a potential top 15 guy, he's there, but I don't think he's going to be a fast laps guy that's going to make the optimal lineup today.
You mentioned about, kind of a little bit of a dead zone here, but you did mention earlier Bubba Wallace is someone who's caught your eye a little bit. He's starting 21st, 6,400 over on DraftKings, 6,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I'm really big on Bubba Wallace. There's like a big three for me as far as cheap drivers go, and he is certainly on my radar. He's actually in my main lineup over on FanDuel right now at $6,000 just to anchor out in the bottom here. But he was super fast in practice, similar to his teammate Kurt Busch. He's actually even faster than him. P6 in the 10 lap, P6 in the 15, P5 in the 20. And Martinsville is actually not too bad of a track for Bubba Wallace. So it looks like he might have potentially a top 15, top 12 car. And I love that price point. And he's priced right beside AJ Allmendinger, who starts 15 spots further back. And people are going to be obviously enamored with that. You have Daniel Suarez there starting in P30. So I'm definitely liking him as a pivot to some of those chalkier options. I think he'll pick up some ownership, but he shouldn't be as high owned.
When you look at this, 7 and 6K range, we've got 3 drivers who are starting second, third, and fourth. So you got Eric Almirola second, Cole Custer starting third, and Chris Suarez starting fourth. So what do you know with these 3 drivers?
The only one I'd even think of playing is Eric Almirola starting in second, just because he's good at short flat tracks. And I'll never forget the last time he started second at Martinsville. At least I think it was the last time. He ended up beating Blaney at the jump of the race, and I had 0% Almirola, and he let some laps at the beginning. It didn't end well for him. It wasn't optimal or anything, but it did give me a heart attack to start. But I just really don't want to play any of these guys, and you got to take some stances somewhere. I know it's not like a big stance because they're going to be low owned, but I just feel comfortable just Xing them out in an optimizer today.
Looking at the other drivers who are in this range, so we've got Eric Jones starting 24th, Austin Cindric starting 13th, Daniel Suarez, who you briefly mentioned there a second ago, starting 30th, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. starting 28th. Yeah,
it's just not a lot of guys I love here. Daniel Suarez is a guy that I am getting to. I think he's a pretty solid play, $6,800 starting in P30. He should have a top 20 car. We like his teammate Ross Chastain. You have to imagine he's going to bring at least some speed. Martinsville is not a good track by any means for Daniel Suarez, but at $6,800, $6,300 over on FanDuel. I mean, if you're going to give me like 15 to 12 spots gained, I will take that. So he's one of my more higher owned cheap plays.
No, I totally get you there. Of course, this is the Awesemo NASCAR Live Before Lock show, and we are sponsored by PrizePicks. Of course, when you sign up, deposit, and play over PrizePicks, you get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. When you take advantage of that, you'll get an email within 24 to 48 hours to explain how you can take advantage of that free month of Awesemo plus Platinum. Of course, also be sure to use that promo code Awesemo for an instant first match deposit of up to $100. And we're looking at their prop plays over there today for tonight's NASCAR slate. Looking over to the fantasy score, I know there are 3 drivers you like, and you all like the overs in this situation. First off, Ryan Blaney, 52.5. Second, Kyle Busch, 51.5, and William Byron, 56.5.
Yeah, it's mainly just me. I'm not going to talk about each one individually. It's just me basically getting the guys I like to dominate the most. And if they're going to dominate, they're going to easily outpace these projections. The one guy I will reference here, Ryan Blaney, is my highest leverage score in the projections. He's only at 52.5 over on PrizePicks. I currently have him around 70 fantasy points. It's just as good as he's been at the short flat tracks this year. He's starting P12, so you have that place differential upside. If he just gets up front at all or picks up fast laps, he is going to blow that 52.5 point prop out of the water. And the same can be said for the others. You're mainly just betting on them racking up dominator points. And if that's going to happen and they don't wreck out and they finish where they should, those are pretty easy overs, but nothing's ever easy in NASCAR.
And of course, get 1 free month of also plus Platinum when you sign a deposit and play over at PrizePicks. You get an email within 24 to 48 hours of how you can take advantage of that free month of Awesemo plus Platinum. So now let's get into the low tier of these salaries. So these would be the drivers that are underneath 6,000. So we got Justin Haley starting 17th, Michael McDowell starting 16th, Harrison Burton 29th, Ty Dillon 34, Corey LaJoie 26, Todd Gillian starting 10th, Josh Bilicki 31st, JJ Elliott 32nd, BJ McCullough 33rd, Cody Ware 35. And there are 2 drivers who are clearly everyone is looking at. That would be Harrison Burton and Ty Dillon.
Yeah, they're going to carry a ton of ownership, and you just kind of have to. I mean, when you're building lineups, you're going to notice where you're probably needing 2 of these 5K drivers in the majority of your lineups if you're trying to do those multi-dom builds, which you're going to have to do takedown tournaments. So naturally, it's going to turn into kind of a stars and scrubs lineup, and these are the 2 that are going to pop the most in projections just about anywhere. P22 in practice for Harrison Burton, P25 for Ty Dillon. Ty Dillon starting 34th, Harrison Burton starting 29th. It's like, the only way these guys are not positive place differential drivers is if they have a mechanical issue or something, or they get into a wreck, and it's not something I'm really going to bank on happening. Yeah. So I will happily eat the ownership, and I'll try to get different somewhere else in my lineup.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is I kind of I look at as our DK top 6 percentage. It really just shows while they're getting great ownership, the odds of them being top 6 is still low.
Right. The thing is, trying to get away from those cheap drivers, you're building lineups, which to me, it doesn't seem like it's the most optimal way to go. Because if you don't want to dip down to that 5 to 6K range, you are going more of a balanced approach. So maybe instead of getting the Elliots, the Blaneys, you're only playing, like you might start with a Denny Hamlin, you might get an Alex Bowman in there, a Christopher Bell. And while that's fine, I just don't think you're capturing the entire amount of dominator points potential that you could end up getting in your lineup. So it's kind of weird how projections work with that, but I do think it is the best way to go.
It's also one of these things where if you're using an optimizer like Fantasy Cruncher to set your lineups, this is where you guys set groups and make sure you're not getting a situation where, you know, the algorithm is pointing out to and getting you, say, 2 of these guys. That's where I'm always set of say, hey, no more than 1 of these drivers.
Yeah, especially as far as like the absolute scrubs go. Like we always talk about it. If you have to get down to these guys, you should probably end up starting over. Like the scenario where Josh Bilicki, Yaley, and McLeod, Cody Ware would be optimal is just insanely low. And I was looking at the optimal lineups just the entire season so far, and outside of Daytona, I mean, you're not seeing any of these guys pop up even close to the optimal. And I think the trends will continue that way because we just don't usually see that happening. And unless a bunch of cars wrecked and we had a big one at Martinsville, I just don't see that happening. So I feel like you can just firmly stay away from them.
I mean, the question has got to be is if you're living down this area, say you're, let's say you're hand building and you say, you know what, I want to get one of these guys in my lineup so I can get to other drivers. I mean, outside of Burton and Dillon, who do you go to?
For me personally, you can't really play a Michael McDowell. He's just not good at these types of tracks. He was slow starting P15. You had to cross him out. You had to cross out Todd Gilliland, who's a guy that I have played so far this season, but starting in 10th place, he's just going to fall. I'm not sure if he's going to fall like a rock, but he will fall, and I just can't see him being the optimal. So that only leaves you with as far as like playable punts, you have Justin Haley starting in P17, but he was 31st in practice. And then you have Corey LaJoie, a guy I've played quite a bit this year, starting in 26. And looking at my own personal exposures, Corey LaJoie is really the only other guy that's getting any ownership from me. I have around 7 to 10%, and the rest of these guys, besides Dillon and Burton, are basically 3% and below, besides maybe a dabble of Haley.
And of course, if you do got any questions, you can line those up in chat. We'll get to those here momentarily. Of course, maybe if you're looking to make a little bit of a betting wager on this one, obviously Chase Elliott is going to be someone that people are going to be looking at. But when we're talking about winning this race, I mean, who are some of the guys that you believe have a good chance of winning this one?
And based off practice, based off of what we've seen this season at short flat tracks, I mean, obviously Chase Elliott would be the number one pick. That's the chalk pick, so that's not exciting to talk about. But you have guys like Ryan Blaney, William Byron, and I mean, if you want to take kind of a long shot, I mean, Alex Bowman seems to have a fast car in practice, and his odds are just a little bit better as far as your return on investment and betting on them. But I mean, it's so hard to get away from that chalk pick of Chase Elliott. It really, everything points to Chase Elliott finally getting that win today.
Yeah, plus 500. You mentioned about Alex Bowman, plus 1,400. So it kind of shows you if maybe you want to take a little bit of a stab there. Of course, you got any questions, be sure to line those up in chat now. We'll start to get through those as we do go on. Just double check on Bob's Twitter account, make sure nothing crazy has happened there yet. But of course, we'll monitor kind of the rain situation there. But if you got any questions, be sure to line those up now as we go through this. Let's go. AFC Angelo says, how much do we think shifting changes past performances here at the paperclip? That's, I think, everyone nicknames this track.
I don't think it's going to be bad. Like, I don't think it's going to have any effect on as far as how we should build our DFS lineups. I feel like that might be looking into it a little bit too much. But for me, it's not changing my approach whatsoever.
Let's see here. 2v2. This will be a DraftKings cash question. Blaney and Burton or Truex and LaJoie?
For me, that's Blaney and Burton. I think Truex is going to be a little bit more popular than Blaney and Cash, but for me, you have to get both Burton and Ty Dillon in cash games. They're both going to be extremely high owned, and I think it's for a good reason. So I'll go with the Burton side.
Philip, looking here at the low end of the equation here on FanDuel, he says, do you like Haley or Burton today on FanDuel? Please pick one if you had to.
Yeah, I don't usually find myself going down dumpster diving too much in FanDuel, although today I did notice I had a little bit more Ty Dillon and Harrison Burton than I expected over there. And I believe the question was him or Justin Haley, correct? And if that's going to be the case, it'd be Harrison Burton for me because you have the extra PD upside, and I feel like they'll finish somewhat close to each other.
Andrew mentions, he says, it goes, I have Blaney, Elliott, and Byron on FanDuel. Is that too much?
No, most of my lineups over on FanDuel do include three of the big name drivers, and I believe my main lineup right now, if I can find it on the cruncher, I believe it does have Chase Elliott, William Byron, and Kyle Larson on it. So it's pretty easy to fit three studs in. And even then I have Ross Chastain as the fourth driver. So I have no problem with that.
Jim has mentioning that his core, I'm guessing this is GPP related, Hamlin, Reddick, Burton, and Truex. So obviously getting away from the chalk of Chase Elliott.
Right. And I mean, if it is a tournament, I mean, that's totally fine getting away from the chalk. I personally am pretty underweight on Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin just because I feel like the dominator upside is pretty capped for where they're starting. Not saying it can't work out. I do have a few shares of them both, but for me, I'm a little bit on the opposite side there.
Kyle Busch or William Byron in GPPs on DraftKings?
For me, it's still William Byron head to head. The ownership's going to be close, I think, maybe closer than we think, but I think William Byron's the better overall play.
E-Rush has a question that look, we have this question every week is how much money do you want to leave on the table?
Yeah, over on DraftKings, I am using pretty much the majority of my salary. If you were able to leave a lot of salary on the table this week, I'm not sure what you're doing because these guys are pretty expensive. It's not like last weekend. So I am finding myself usually using most of the salary this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things for me, trying to kind of go into cruncher and try to allow myself to get different. I mean, look, you can look at today. I'm looking at ownership projections right now. I'm saying, okay, well, one clear way to get different is to not put Chase Elliott in my lineup. I mean, as in talking about getting different outside of Chase Elliott, how do we get different time?
Pairing Chase, you can pair Chase Elliott with just some non-chalkier dominators. Like a lot of people are to go the Chase Elliott, William Byron route. Well, instead of doing that, you could go the Chase Elliott and maybe look at a guy like Joey Logano who's not picking up much ownership. You have Christopher Bell there. Like you can play Chase Elliott today, even though he's chalk. I know people like to avoid chalk, but it's just some guys are in such a good spots. I mean, it's like that. Chase Elliott seems like that 3K player in NBA that's going to play 30 minutes where he's just not going to bust. Like it just seems like a perfect scenario. So I'm going to eat that. I'd rather get different somewhere else. Maybe just mixing them with a cheap potential, not maybe cheap, but just a low owned dom like a maybe Christopher Bell, who people are not getting to. You have Kevin Harvick, those kind of guys.
Jim's also mentioned about a driver we talked about. I know you like him here today, Bubba Wallace.
Oh yeah, I'm very big on Bubba Wallace. He's, as far as like the cheap guys go down low, it's like a big three for me. It's Harrison Burton, it's Ty Dillon, and I'm going to lump Bubba Wallace in there as well. A little bit more expensive than them, but according to practice, he's got a top 10 car. I'm not sure he's going to run top 10 in the race, but I think he can be a top 12, top 15 contender, and that's good enough at his price point.
And of course, place differential there starting 21st. Kind of when obviously there's some drivers in that 20 to 30 range that we've talked about. I know I saw a question a little earlier about Tyler Reddick. Of course, we talked about him a little bit earlier in the show. He's starting 22nd, 8,600 over on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I'm pretty big on Tyler Reddick today. Both him and Chastain are pretty similar plays for me, but he is starting 5 spots further up than Chastain, so it doesn't look like he's going to be quite as popular, because just for a couple $100 more on both sites, you can get up to Ross Chastain, which goes a little bit safer. How good Chastain's been, but Tyler Reddick has been just about equally as fast. And if you're going to get him at lower ownership, I think he's a pretty good pivot towards him.
You mentioned a second ago about Christopher Bell, how, potential dominator not getting a lot of ownership. Is there someone besides Christopher Bell that you look at and say, man, I want to be overweight on the field because I just think he's not owned enough?
It's tough because a lot of these dominators are going to pick up quite a bit of ownership. It's pretty spread out besides Chase Elliott. Hate to call Kyle Busch not getting enough ownership, but because he is going to be picked. But as far as my own personal exposures, I am pretty heavily overweight on Kyle Busch, on Ryan Blaney, and on William Byron as far as the DOMs go. Joey Logano is the other guy I think that you shouldn't forget about. It's just starting P14. He might get lost in the shuffle here a little bit because he's priced in between guys like Byron, Bowman, Hamlin, all these popular plays, and he hasn't been quite as good this year, but you can never forget about Joey Logano at a short flat track.
No question about that. Of course, if you got any questions, be sure to line those up in chat. Going through our Discord chat to some of the questions that have come through, I'm sure a lot of people would be interested. One of the questions was about the cash viability of Alex Bowman.
Yeah, he was the guy that I'm kind of on the fence about as far as cash games go, but I found myself having enough money. I had around $9,400 left for my final spot, and Alex Bowman's right there. I have nothing against him. I already had Chastain in my lineup. If it was between him or Chastain and cash, I'm probably leaning towards Chastain, but I had the money for both. And starting P16, you have enough PD upside to gain like maybe around 10 spots. He's got the potential to win the race, so I think it's going to happen. No, but he's in a Hendrick car. He's decently cheap compared to the rest, and practice looked really strong.
Jim says, God help me, but do we play Kyle Busch today?
I hope so. I am pretty overweight on Kyle Busch. I took the over on PrizePicks at 51.5 points. I think he's definitely got a path to 60, 70 plus points in this race. All the JGR cars were pretty slow, and I am pretty low on them overall. Christopher Bell, Denny Hill, Martin Truex, but Kyle Busch was the one that showed a lot of speed in practice. And if that's going to carry over, starting in P11, only 10K, we know Kyle Busch can drive a car to the checker flag in just about any single track or any single kind of car he's in. So I'll bet on the talent here at this price point.
Andrew goes, who's a third driver you like pairing with Chase Elliott and William Byron?
So the third driver that's getting paired with those two the most, I believe, in my lineups is a guy like Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick, Alex Bowman. If you're pushing it, you do have to get a little bit weird down low just to try to make that work. But double cheap drivers, I think, is totally fine. So it's kind of that upper 8 to lower 9K range, and then it turns into a bit of a stars and scrubs build.
Next up, Steve says, is Daniel Suarez a good place differential play?
Yeah, he certainly is. $6,800 seems a bit cheap for Suarez. He has been decently fast so far this year, starting in P30. It's hard to imagine he's not going to get 10 for a top 20, maybe a top 15 once it's all said and done. He's not that great at Martinsville. The history isn't great. We're talking about an average finish around 25th place. So that does cause some concern, but he was top 20 in practice. And I mean, I like the price point quite a bit.
Of course, be sure to smash that thumbs up button, hit the, if you're not subscribed to also right here on YouTube, be sure to do that as well. Hit that notification bell so you know a new show is live here on the channel. Of course, a couple days before this show, you can check out Chris's our video on demand that we have here at Awesemo.com as he gets you ready for this race as well. Of course, you got any questions, be sure to line those up as well. And I think that as we're talking about how we're constructing our rosters, it's so top heavy today with some of these salary drivers that, we mentioned about, hey, you're going to get the Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, 20, place differential he's got sitting there. As I look at our top 6%, Denny Hamlin, one of the highest guys we have there. It's so top heavy, but we're talking about these top 6% with how you're developing your lineups.
It really is. And if you want to try to get away from that, you can build some pretty balanced lineups today. I don't think it's going to be the best projection wise, but if you start your lineup with William Byron, I mean, there's a chance where he could be the early dominator over Chase Elliott if something happens to him. You can pair him up with Alex Bowman. You have Tyler Reddick, Kevin Harvick. All these guys are viable. So while a lot of people are going to be top heavy, there is a chance a balanced build could end up working in tournaments.
In terms of DraftKings versus FanDuel, is there someone on FanDuel you like today that maybe you're not as high on when it comes to DraftKings?
Yeah, so just for an example here, Chris Buescher, $7,000 on DK. He's starting in fourth. I feel like he's nearly unplayable. But over on FanDuel at $5,500, it's a little bit easier to stomach. And I do have but around 8 to 10% of Chris Buescher over on FanDuel compared to just about 0 on DraftKings. So it's one of the more drastic differences on the sites because, on FanDuel, you don't get penalized as much for losing spots. And I feel like Chris Buescher, if he just happens to have his kind of race where he's, hanging inside the top 10 all day with this good track position, it's going to pay off over on FanDuel more so than it would on DK.
Of course, Jim, bringing up about Allmendinger. I mean, you mentioned it kind of earlier, this pass-through penalty and being on a short track, really tough situation here.
Yeah, he's going to start the race multiple laps down. We're not talking where he's going to be lapped down. He's going to be the only car a lap down for the majority of the race. At a short track, these guys get lapped quickly. I mean, we're going to see so many guys a lap down by the end of this race. And if you're just new to NASCAR, you're probably going to think, what the heck happened? But I mean, if this stays great, like he's going to need multiple yellows for this to work, especially at the very beginning. And if that's not going to happen, we're talking about, if Chase Elliott's just lapping the field, there's like 7 guys in the lap at the end. It could be a pretty long race for AJ Allmendinger.
Of course, every day over our Twitter handle at Awesemo Bets, we have a free premium betting picks from our betting package. And today's free pick just went up on Twitter. You can check it out right now at Awesemo Bets. Is Trey Lyles under 12.5 points over there at Caesar Sportsbook minus 110. You got to check that out every day as we got great premium betting content over here at Awesemo.com every day. So be sure to check out that. Check out Odd Shopper when you're looking to make those bets on, say, it's NBA tonight with Trey Lyles, maybe MLB, which is already in full motion. Of course, mentioned about the promo we got going on for an MLB Express Pass. So check that out over there as well as MLB's in full season. I know, Chris, you're big into MLB every day, along with big into NASCAR as well. Angelo with the question, he says, is Cody Ware the pivot away from either Ty or Burton in order to free up another 1,000?
Is he a pivot by definition? Yes. Is he a good one? No, he just does not have quite the upside that those guys are. I mean, Cody Ware was like P35 in practice. He's finished in the 30s at both short flat tracks. For Cody Ware to have a good day, we're talking about a top 32, and that's just not going to be an optimal lineup.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you're starting 35th too, the question is how soon, whether we're talking about Chase Elliott, maybe it's a William Byron, just start lapping these cars that are at the end of the field. Right,
and guys like Ty Dillon and Harrison Burton, are they going to be on the lead lap at the end of the race? Probably not, but they'll probably be on it long enough to where they at least have some upside for us. Guys like Yaley, Balicki, McLeod, Cody Ware, these are the kind of guys you see like double-digit laps down by the end of this race if it stays green for long periods of time.
Of course, you got any questions, be sure to hit those up in chat right now. We'll get to them as they do come in and just kind of looking there at the radar, something kind of we got to pay attention to. Of course, a green flag is expected to go down at 7:58 p.m. local time. Jim's wants to thoughts on Kyle Larson.
Before getting to Larson, I just want to mention that Bob did tweet that we now have occasional ice/sleet for this race. So it adds a whole nother wrinkle into it.
Yeah.
But
something we don't have to worry about here in Florida.
Right. That's what I love. That's what I love here. But anyway, getting into Kyle Larson, I feel like we haven't talked too much about him, but his price point is nice at $10,600. He's starting in P8, and his practice times are right up there with Chase Elliott as being in William Byron, his teammates, as being one of the best cars in the field. Now, I don't typically roster Kyle Larson in Martinsville too much. Did lead some laps here last year, but did fade away a little bit at the end. But I still have shares of Kyle Larson. I'm higher on Kyle Larson than I am on guys like Martin Truex and Denny Hamlin, if that tells you anything. I just buy into the fact that I think he's got a better chance to dominate than those two. So while he's not a fade for me, I am just a little bit underweight.
Jeff Williams, I appreciate you in the super chat. He says last man on DK high dollar GPP on DraftKings 7,300 or below. I'm between Jones, Cindric, and Dinger.
If it's a high dollar GPP, I just wouldn't feel comfortable risking it with AJ Allmendinger. Like, yes, it is nice. He's starting P36, but if you're playing a high dollar GPP, I'm not sure I want to sweat it just to get Dinger back in the lead lap. I'd rather take my chances with someone that doesn't have an issue to start the race. And for me, I'm probably going to get to Eric Jones. Austin Cindric did have a fast car in practice, was kind of top 8, top 10 across the board, but I know Jones was awful in practice. But for where he's starting in 24th, feels a little bit safe. And if you already have some other tournament plays, I think Jones can kind of round that out nicely.
Yeah, you're talking about a $200 difference over on DraftKings, 7,300 for Cindric, 7,100 for Jones, and Jones starting 11 spots behind him too.
Yeah, which makes him a much safer play. So it kind of depends. Like, if your lineup's already super safe, maybe you do take that chance on Austin Cindric. If it's already looking pretty tournamenty, that's even a word. Take Harry Jones starting in P24.
Mentioned about some other drivers that maybe we really haven't necessarily talked about a ton about. We've talked about Allmendinger a lot of why he is a very risky play here today with that pass through penalty. I know mentioned about Daniel Suarez again here. He's starting 30th, 6,800 over there over on DraftKings, and is getting some ownership on DraftKings.
I think it's certainly deserved. Like, he's better than a 30th place driver. I think Daniel Suarez should probably be a mid 7K driver this week. So we are getting a pretty nice price point. And the fact that he's starting so deep in the field, I mean, it screams value for sure. And I would say he's definitely one of the better value plays below 7K. Kind of group him into the Ty Dillon, Harrison Burton, Bubba Wallace tier of just my favorite cheap place differential plays down low. I mean, top 20 car in practice, terrible at Martinsville, but he's shown us some speed this year. I like Team Trackhouse, and I mean, he's pretty much guaranteed positive place differential points if all goes well for him. He doesn't have any issues.
You know, we mentioned about Martin Truex Jr. being the most expensive driver on this slate today, whether you're playing over on DraftKings or FanDuel. But, you know, obviously you're getting nowhere near the ownership that Chase Elliott's getting, nowhere near the ownership that William Byron's getting.
Yeah, I think people might just be having the same thought process that I have. Like, yes, the place differential is certainly there, but we don't really care too much about place differential at a track like this. Yes, it's nice when cheaper drivers have place differential because we're not looking for dominator points from them. But the drivers that are priced at the very top where we need those 100-plus points at a short flat track, Truex is kind of on the outside looking in for me just because of where he's starting, and the practice speeds weren't amazing in practice.
Josh says Kurt Busch or Brad Keselowski on a GPP on DraftKings.
For me, it's going to be Kurt Busch, and that's not just because I'm anti-Brad Keselowski. I think the numbers would suggest to go with Kurt Busch here, top 10 car in practice. Pretty good at Martinsville. I know Brad Keselowski's one of the best drivers here, but it's definitely a different tune this year as he's with the RFK instead of Team Penske. So I'll go with Kurt Busch, even though I'm sure he hurt a lot of feelings last week.
Kyle Busch or Blaney on DraftKings coming in from Jets World.
If you give me a head-to-head with Blaney, then I'm always going to take the Blaney side. But I do like him quite a bit, starting P12. He's just been so good at the short flat tracks this year. It's hard to bet against.
So I just saw this comment in Discord. It just said, Truex basically just said he hates his car. So, of course, I just go to Twitter, search Martin Truex Jr. So this is, it was on the feel of his next-gen car. Quote, I'm a little nervous about it. I don't think we have the speed to get to the front and win it.
And that's what I've been saying the entire show. So it's like he's listening and reaffirming it for me.
That's usually when I see a comment like that in Discord, I'm like, oh, let me go to the old Twitter search machine and let me just see what he just said. Philip, Haley or Burton?
For me, it's Burton. I just like the extra place differential there.
Of course, just got a couple more minutes here left in the show. If you do got any questions, be sure to line those up in chat as we do go on. Of course, is there a driver that maybe we haven't touched on a ton that is someone that when you look at your personal exposures, you're like, you know what, that's a guy that could be maybe my sneaky play of the day?
Ooh, let me take a look at my personal exposures right now. So top of my list, I got Elliott, Ty Dillon, William Byron. That's no surprise there.
Yeah.
We haven't talked too much about Kevin Harvick. I got just over 20% of him. And I know the practice kind of sucked for him, but it's the price point that's drawing me in. I'm not going to get overly concerned about practice with Kevin Harvick. We know he's a veteran driver. Maybe he was just trying to test it out a little bit. I'm trying to talk myself into maybe some more Kevin Harvick here, but I like the spot where he's at. Starting P6, he could be a sneaky dominator, and he's shown his speed at Phoenix. He showed his speed at Richmond last week, finished second, almost won the race at the very end over Denny Hamlin. And he's the only non-place differential driver in the 8K range, so might get skipped over a little bit, but I think he's probably like one of the better leverage guys just because of where he's starting and people aren't going to want to gravitate towards him as much.
Yeah, just give you a little insight in terms of Kevin Harvick and our top two dominator percentage, just a little under 10% of potentially being a top two dominator.
Right, and that's fine with me because of his price point. If he was around $11,000, that would obviously concern me being a top level dominator. But at $8,400, if he's just kind of chilling in top 5 all day, racking up fast laps quietly, that could be enough to get the job done.
8,100 left in the DraftKings GPP. Kurt Busch, Chris Buescher, or someone else?
For me, that would be Kurt Busch. I know you're kind of getting close to maxing out your salary cap there, but I feel fine with it.
Do we like? The question is, do you like Gillihan at all? I mean, he's starting 10th. I think more of that question is, with where he's starting, what is the path for him being optimal?
So for Ty Dillon to be optimal, so let's compare him to some of the other cheap 5K drivers. So for Ty Dillon, let's say he finishes P25, which I think is a respectable number for him. We're talking 26 points. If he has a decent race where he's finishing in the upper 20s, we're looking at kind of the mid-30s points. The same can be said for Harrison Burton. For Todd Gilliland to get around 30-some points, we're talking a top 10 finish, and I can very easily name 10 drivers I think would finish over Todd Gilliland today. And I think by the end, we'd probably see Gilliland fighting for a top 20. Starting close to the front might help him out staying on the lead lap, but at the end of the day, we're talking about a fringe top 20 guy, and practice speeds would suggest the same.
Yeah, I mean, he's, when you look at kind of in that similar range, outside of him, the only one that are starting in the top 20 are Justin Haley and Michael McDowell. And you mentioned earlier about why you don't like Michael McDowell today.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at practice, he was P20 in the 10 lap, P21 in the 15, which was a little bit better, but not as many drivers ran 15 laps. But I mean, short flat tracks are really not his bread and butter. He's a little bit better at intermediates. Just the past 6 races at short tracks, talking about a P30, P27, P26, P28, P25, and a P17. Starting in 15th, it's just impossible for me to get to McDowell. I believe I have 0% today, and I feel good about it.
You're not the only one that has 0%. I don't think there's many people who are trying to get to Michael McDowell based on what I'm seeing. So Rick's playing against his son. He wants a little help / advice. Okay. He's playing over on FanDuel. He's throwing his lineup out there of Chase, Blaney, Byron, Harvick, and Ty Dillon. In terms of like FanDuel game theory, I mean, what's kind of your thoughts on FanDuel today?
Yeah, and I'm normally one that says, let's try not to get down to that Ty Dillon range on FanDuel, but I'm actually finding myself doing that more often than I usually do today. And I was actually building some single entries. It's not what I ended up with, but I did have Ty Dillon make some builds I was working with, and I was like, I actually don't hate this lineup. If he can get a top 20 finish, it's not the worst thing in the world. And he has done that in Martinsville. For me personally, the lowest I've been going, just when it was all said and done, was Bubba Wallace at $6,000. So maybe drop one of those drivers to maybe get up from Ty Dillon a little bit. But I'm not sure how good your son is at FanDuel NASCAR, so maybe you don't have to get too strategized on this. I think it's a good enough lineup to beat maybe a more casual player, and if that's who you're playing against, I think that lineup's fine.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we all get in the situation every week, no matter what kind of race it is, where we start getting to a driver, whether it's a 20 max, 150 max, whatever it may be, that you start sitting there going, man, I'm just getting way too much of that driver. Was there somebody earlier on in the week that you found yourself like going, oh man, that's just way too much?
Well, right now I have over 40% Harrison Burton. And if you told me I was going to have more than 40% Harrison Burton on like Tuesday, I would have, I'm not sure what I've said, but I don't think I would have believed you. But just the way the slate works out, I'm a little bit way overweight on some of these guys and more so than I thought I would. And I'm a little bit lower on guys I thought I was going to be heading into the week. Like heading into the week, I thought I was going to be like 60, 70% on Martin Truex Jr. Same can be said for Denny Hamlin. And it's kind of been the complete opposite. And that just kind of goes to show you how important watching what happens in practice and qualifying can be.
Dan says, if you're fading Elliott, who would you pivot to as an early dominator on DraftKings GPP?
For me, it'd be William Byron. Like of all the top 5 drivers, we're talking about Chase Elliott, William Byron. Then we have Almirola, Chris Buescher, Cole Custer. I mean, those are by far the 2 best drivers in that top 5. And if Chase Elliott doesn't get it done, maybe Eric Almirola does, as ugly as that sounds. But as far as like a top level dominator, for me, it'd be William Byron.
Ty or Burton on DraftKings GPP?
Oh, so head to head against the 2 best cheap plays. I mainly been viewing them as just you pair them together, but if I had to pick between the 2, it'd be Ty Dillon.
Other is Steve saying, is taking shots at Christopher Bell too risky?
For me, it's pretty risky. I don't believe I have much Christopher Bell at all. If I can pull up my exposures right now, I had Christopher Bell at 1%, which is completely opposite what I had last week. I had around 40% Christopher Bell. So it's quite the turn I have, but I just have a hard time seeing him make the optimal lineup. If he was fast in practice, I'd be more inclined to play him, but practice speeds weren't too kind for him.
Of course, be sure to smash that thumbs up button. Of course, subscribe to also right here on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you know when a show is live here on the channel. Just a couple more minutes left here before we will get out of here for this edition of the Awesemo NASCAR Live Before Lock show. Anything else, any other drivers you want to mention that maybe we just haven't really talked much about?
I feel like we fit on every single driver. I mean, if you just kind of want the drivers I am building around today overall, just be transparent. Chase Elliott, Ty Dillon, William Byron. It's like the 3 core drivers I'm working with.
JJT saying, is it a Hendrick stack or the JGR stack tonight? I think I know your answer, but
for me, it's Hendrick. I mean, if we're looking at practice speeds, it was Hendrick by far, not even close, besides Kyle Busch. And looking at my ownerships or my own personal exposures, yeah, there's a lot of Hendrick in there.
No question about it. Jim says Larson ? On Jones. I'm guessing he means, I don't know if that's Larson v. Jones or what he's exactly mean there, because obviously there's a big price difference between those 2 guys.
Oh, that's easy. If that's the question, I'll easily take Larson. I'll take a softball question.
Not sure exactly what Jim meant there, because it's not like they're very, very different salaries apart. But that is going to wrap it up for this edition of the Awesemo NASCAR Live Before Lock show. Huge thanks to our sponsor, PrizePicks. Be sure to check out them over there at PrizePicks. Of course, you get 1 free month of Also Plus Platinum when you sign up, deposit, and play over at PrizePicks. So hopefully we have a great race tonight. Hopefully see those winning screenshots once the race is over. Hope everyone has a great Saturday night and a great rest of your weekend. Have a good night, everybody.